I told you to stop this construction right now. You are ruining the neighborhood, and I won't stand for it.
According to this report, there have been complaints about the construction noise.
We are operating within the permitted hours, officer.
He looked up. Across the fence, Mrs. Carmichael, his neighbor, leaned on the top rail, face twisted. Her grip on her phone tightened. "I'm just planting," Marcus said, voice steady. He gestured to the beds. "These are my flowers. My yard." "Your yard?" she scoffed, stepping closer. "I don't think so. I'm calling the cops. You don't belong here." Her finger hovered over her phone screen like a trigger. Marcus felt a cold weight settle in his chest. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had drawn every blueprint, hammered every nail, and landscaped every corner of this house. Yet she acted as if it were hers to police. He said calmly, "This is my home. I built it myself. You can check the permits." Her eyes narrowed. "Yeah, right. You think a little paper proves anything? People like you don't just own neighborhoods like this." Marcus's heart thumped. Her tone, the thinly veiled threat, the implied danger, he recognized it instantly. A sudden horn blared from the street. Her phone glowed. The blue and red reflection in her screen made the world tilt. "Sir, what's going on here?" a voice barked from behind him. Marcus froze. The law was arriving, because she said so. And the day he celebrated his hard work had just become a trial he never asked for. Cliffhanger, he looked over his shoulder. The uniformed officer's eyes were hard, skeptical, scanning him as if he didn't belong in the world he had built. Marcus crouched beside the marigolds, the warm dirt sticky under his fingernails. Each plant was aligned, each bed shaped with care. He straightened and wiped his brow. Morning sunlight cut through the fence slats, glinting off freshly painted siding. "Hey, what are you doing there?" Marcus froze. Mrs. Carmichael leaned over the fence, phone in hand, eyes sharp. She wore her cardigan too tightly, a frown etched permanently. "I'm planting flowers," Marcus said carefully. "These are my yard." "Your yard?" Her voice sharpened. "I don't think so. I'm calling the cops. You don't belong here." Marcus's chest tightened. He swallowed. This is my home. I built it. I have the permits. You can check." Her laugh was short, almost metallic. "Paper doesn't mean anything. People like you don't just own neighborhoods like this." Marcus felt the familiar squeeze of fear that always followed prejudice. Yet, he didn't flinch. He straightened, voice calm but firm. "I worked hard for this. This is my house. You can verify it." She raised her phone, fingers hovering over the screen. A car horn blared down the street. Marcus looked up. The police cruiser turned into the cul-de-sac. Red and blue reflected on the siding, painting the yard in urgency. "Sir, what's going on here?" Marcus's stomach dropped. Uniformed officers approached, eyes scanning him as though he were a stranger in his own home. "This neighbor says you're trespassing," one officer asked. Tone clipped. Not accusatory yet, but the implication was clear. "I'm not trespassing. This is my property. I built it myself," Marcus said, gesturing to the house he had labored over for years. "I have all the permits." The neighbor whispered into her phone, a small smirk playing across her lips. Marcus felt a simmer of anger beneath his calm exterior. Years of proving himself in a world that doubted him flashed in his mind. And here it was again, suspicion, authority questioning, bias wrapped in civility. "Let me see your ID and the property deed," the officer said. His eyes flicked to Marcus, then back to Mrs. Carmichael, weighing her word over reality. Marcus reached into his pocket, pulling out the neatly folded paperwork. "Here. Every document you need." The officer flipped through the papers but didn't look convinced. Mrs. Carmichael stepped closer, voice low, sharp. "I told you. Something's off. Just watch him. Make sure he doesn't try anything." Marcus's jaw tightened. He felt the weight of history pressing down, the countless times assumptions preceded facts, how skin color always added invisible chains. The officer cleared his throat, not meeting Marcus's eyes. "Right. We'll verify." Marcus's family emerged on the porch, watching silently. His daughter clutched her mother's hand. His wife's eyes were steady but worried. Their pride, built brick by brick with Marcus's own hands, suddenly felt fragile under the gaze of suspicion. "Sir," the officer said again, voice firmer this time, "we need to step inside and ask some questions." Marcus inhaled deeply, steadying himself. Every muscle tensed. This was not just about property, it was about dignity, respect, recognition. And for the first time, it felt like every assumption, every judgment, was aimed at dismantling that. Mrs. Carmichael's smirk widened. Her phone glowed in the sunlight, casting blue light across her narrowed eyes. Marcus looked at the officer, then back at her. The silence stretched, heavy and threatening. Then, the officer gestured. "Let's go." Marcus's pulse thrummed in his ears. He followed, clutching his paperwork, every step a mixture of pride and apprehension. The neighbor whispered again, low enough that only the officer might hear. Marcus couldn't catch the words, but the threat was clear. Cliffhanger. The officer glanced at him suspiciously, eyes hard, scanning his body as if he didn't belong. Marcus realized the day he celebrated his hard work had just become a trial he never asked for. The living room smelled faintly of fresh paint and new wood. Marcus sat on the edge of the couch, papers neatly stacked on the coffee table. The officer stood stiffly in front of him. Officer Reynolds, the taller one, arms crossed, narrowed his eyes, while the younger one, Officer Parks, shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot. "Sir," Reynolds began, voice clipped, "can you explain why your neighbor thought you were suspicious?" Marcus inhaled slowly. His pulse raced. "I'm not suspicious. I live here. I built this house. I have permits, receipts, the deed, everything legal and documented." Parks glanced at Reynolds, then back at Marcus. Reynolds corrected, "We just need details. Why did she call us?" "I don't know," Marcus said. His voice stayed calm, but inside, a storm raged. He could feel the weight of assumptions pressing down on him, the subtle disbelief in their eyes. The same look he had seen on city streets, in offices, everywhere he went, a polite questioning, but with a clear undertone, "You don't belong here." "Seems odd," Reynolds muttered. "You've lived here, what, 6 months?" "Yes. 6 months. I've done everything legally. I have neighbors who know me, friends in the community." Marcus paused. "Everyone knows this is my house." Reynolds leaned in slightly. "And yet she still felt threatened." "Yes," Marcus said firmly. "Apparently, my presence in my own home was enough to raise suspicion." Parks coughed nervously. "Sir, we're just trying to get to the bottom of it." Marcus's hands clenched on his knees. "I get that," he said quietly. "But the bottom of it shouldn't be judged by someone else's prejudice." A sharp knock on the door made them all jump. Mrs. Carmichael's voice sneered through the speaker. "Officer Reynolds? Are you even checking this? This man shouldn't just be here." Reynolds held up a hand. "We're aware, He turned to Marcus. "Did you know she might have had previous complaints about you?" "What?" Marcus leaned forward. "Previous complaints? About me?" "Yes," Reynolds said slowly. "She called about a minor incident last month." Marcus shook his head, disbelief sharp in his chest. "Minor incident? I've never had any issue. Nothing." Parks whispered something to Reynolds, but Marcus didn't catch the words. He noticed the officer's slight smirk when their eyes met, and it stung, a subtle dismissal. Reynolds folded his arms. "Well, we have to check everything. I mean, if you're building a house, doing landscaping, moving around equipment, it might look suspicious to some." Marcus froze, a flicker of disbelief and fury. "Suspicious? My work is suspicious?" "Yes," he said, voice rising slightly. "Suspicious. Because I'm black. That's the only thing that makes sense here." The room went quiet. Reynolds' jaw tightened. Parks avoided eye contact, shuffling paperwork. "Sir," Reynolds said slowly, carefully, "we don't judge by skin color. We just," he paused. "We need to verify. That's all." Marcus leaned back, exhaling. "Verification is fine. But don't pretend this is about anything else. You're questioning me because she called, and you assumed my guilt before looking at facts." The officers exchanged a glance. Marcus's family watched silently from the doorway. His wife's hand rested lightly on their daughter's shoulder. Fear lingered in her eyes, but pride too, pride in Marcus's calm, in his dignity under scrutiny. Parks shifted nervously. "We'll need to see additional proof. Utility bills, permits, everything." Marcus pulled out the folder from the couch. "Already here. Every document, every receipt, every plan I filed legally. You can check everything." Reynolds flipped through the papers but didn't seem fully convinced. He looked up at Marcus with a tight expression. "So, you're saying none of this is fake? All legal?" "Yes," Marcus said firmly. Everything. You're welcome to verify with the city, with anyone. This house is mine. I built it myself. Mrs. Carmichael's voice cut through again. I'm telling you, something's off. You just wait, there's more they'll find if they check. Don't trust him. Marcus's chest tightened. Her tone carried a hidden threat, a confidence he recognized from years of similar encounters. You can't fight this. Reynolds glanced at Marcus. She seems confident. Yes, Marcus said, teeth gritting slightly. She's confident that prejudice protects her. But facts aren't afraid of assumptions. There was a pause. Marcus could feel the tension pressing down on him. The officers held his documents, scanning through them. Every second stretched, heavy with anticipation, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Finally, Reynolds leaned back slightly. We'll verify this. But we have to follow protocol. You understand, right? Marcus nodded, though his jaw was tight. I understand. But understand this too. I'm not guilty of anything except being assumed guilty. And that assumption? That's the real problem here. Parks cleared his throat, uneasy. We'll check everything and get back to you, sir. Marcus exhaled, tension still coiling in his chest. He watched the officers, trying to gauge their belief, their honesty. He could see the microaggressions, the subtle doubt, and the bias that lingered beneath professionalism. Mrs. Carmichael lingered at the window, smirking faintly. Just wait, she muttered under her breath. Marcus's daughter tugged lightly at his sleeve. Daddy, are they going to take our house? His chest tightened. He crouched to her level, meeting her wide eyes. No, baby. This is our home. We built it. They'll see that. But even as he spoke, a small voice inside whispered doubt. How many times would assumptions outweigh facts? How long until prejudice overrode reason? The officers finally left, taking the documents with them. Mrs. Carmichael waved cheerfully from across the street, an insidious satisfaction on her face. Marcus closed the front door, leaning against it. His hands shook slightly, adrenaline still coursing. The house felt smaller somehow, the walls pressing in with the weight of scrutiny. Cliffhanger. That evening, a text alert buzzed on Marcus's phone. It was a forwarded message from the city office. Previous complaint filed, review required. Officer Reynolds flagged for verification. Marcus stared at the screen, pulse hammering. The neighbors' whispers weren't idle. The challenge wasn't over. And he realized that what began as a simple act of gardening had become a legal and emotional battle he never signed up for. The city office was quiet, almost sterile. Marcus spread the papers across the table. Permits, deeds, receipts, inspection approvals, all meticulously organized. Each page was a testament to years of planning, hard work, and persistence. Officer Reynolds leaned over, peering at the stack, his expression unreadable. Parks hovered near the door, shifting uneasily. Everything here looks extensive, Reynolds said cautiously, flipping through the first few pages. Did you do all of this yourself? Yes, Marcus said firmly. I designed the house, managed construction, handled the paperwork. Every step legal, every document filed correctly. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. Here. You know, some people might not believe that. It's unusual to see someone handle everything themselves. Marcus's jaw tightened. Unusual? Because I'm black? Because I'm not, what, a wealthy investor with a white last name? The officer paused. I'm just saying, his voice faltered slightly. Reynolds was used to questioning, but something about Marcus's calm certainty threw him off. Parks coughed. We just want to make sure everything checks out. You understand, right? I understand, Marcus said, feeling the familiar squeeze of frustration. But you also need to understand this. My paperwork doesn't exist to appease suspicion. It exists because it's my home. I built it. Reynolds tapped a finger on the desk. Right. Still, there was that previous complaint. We have to investigate that too. What previous complaint? Marcus asked, eyebrows knitting. She didn't specify anything except that I looked suspicious while working on my own yard. That's it. That's the entire complaint. Exactly, Reynolds said slowly. Technically, it's enough to warrant verification. Marcus exhaled slowly, the room closing in on him. The pattern was familiar: paperwork, protocol, suspicion. But the underlying current was clear: assumptions rooted in bias. A small knock interrupted the tension. The office door opened a crack. A junior clerk peeked in. Excuse me, sir, she said to Mrs. Carmichael's reflection in Marcus's memory. "We flagged a previous incident with a neighbor. Details are vague." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Vague? That's convenient. The details are vague so assumptions can fill the gaps." Reynolds glanced at him, stiffly. "We can't ignore prior reports. That's procedure." Marcus's voice was steady but firm. "Then procedure needs to be applied fairly. Prior reports shouldn't be used as a weapon because someone assumed the worst about me before seeing proof." The officer shifted. "Fair enough," he muttered. "But legally, we have to document it all." Marcus leaned back, letting the frustration bubble but controlling the words. Each officer's gaze weighed him down, subtle disbelief, doubt flickering across their faces. It was institutional. It was a silent force that could drown him if he faltered. Parks whispered to Reynolds, something Marcus couldn't hear, but he caught the glance, nervous, unsure, slightly guilty. He sensed the officer's internal conflict, protocol versus prejudice, doubt versus assumption. Mrs. Carmichael's smirk haunted the back of his mind. He could almost hear her whispering through the phone, "They'll see what they expect to see, not the truth." Marcus tapped the folder. Every inspection, every permit, every payment. All verifiable. You can contact anyone. I did not cut corners. I did not misrepresent myself. Reynolds paused on a blueprint. "You planned all of this?" He gestured at the detailed schematics. "From foundation to roof?" "Yes," Marcus said, voice firm. "Every measurement, every nail, every plan. You're welcome to verify it." There was a long pause. The tension was palpable, pressing against the walls of the office. The faint hum of fluorescent lights seemed louder than it should, each flicker a drumbeat in Marcus's chest. Then, a new notification buzzed on Reynolds' phone. He glanced at it, then at Marcus. There's a new update on the complaint. Apparently, someone submitted an anonymous note claiming, suggesting there might be issues with the property documents. Marcus stared. "Anonymous note? What issues?" "Everything here is legal. Verified. Checked." Reynolds shrugged slightly, a defensive gesture. "We just have to follow through. That's the job." The room seemed smaller suddenly, the paperwork heavier. Marcus felt the old tension, the invisible judgment, the lingering doubt. Years of societal bias condensed into a few minutes of officer uncertainty. He exhaled, steadying himself. "I've faced assumptions before," he said quietly. "In banks, in offices, even in public spaces. But this is my home. You're questioning the life I built because someone assumed I couldn't have done it." Reynolds cleared his throat. We're just following procedure." "Then follow it correctly," Marcus said, calm but unwavering. "Verify facts, not assumptions. Judge evidence, not skin color. That's the only fair way." Parks glanced nervously at the floor, avoiding eye contact. Reynolds flipped through the stack once more, pausing on the permit signed by the city inspector. Marcus's heart thudded. Every second felt stretched, measured by doubt. The paperwork was clear, yet the tension remained. The officer's discomfort was evident, one hand brushing over a crease in the paper, a small cough, a shift in weight. Bias never needed words. Finally, Reynolds straightened. "All right, we'll verify this. But keep your phone available. Someone from the city might call for confirmation." Marcus nodded, fighting the urge to clench his fists. The documents were ironclad. Yet the struggle wasn't over. Every paper, every signature, every stamp had to survive the assumptions, the doubts, the microaggressions masquerading as procedure. A knock on the office window made them all start. Marcus looked up. A local journalist had arrived, camera slung over her shoulder, notebook in hand, curiosity and determination written across her face. Reynolds' eyebrows flicked up. We'll continue verification in a moment." Marcus felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, finally, someone outside the institutional gaze would witness the truth. But the tension tightened again. Across the office, his neighbor's smirk seemed to linger in every shadow, in every glance. "Cliffhanger," the journalist stepped closer, speaking softly. "I heard about the complaint, mind if I record your side?" Marcus realized that exposure could be both a lifeline and a new kind of threat. And just as he opened his mouth to respond, Reynolds' phone buzzed again, another alert about a prior issue that no one had explained. Marcus's pulse spiked. This wasn't over. It was only just beginning. By mid-afternoon, the street had started to fill with curious neighbors. Cars slowed as they passed Marcus's house, some stopping entirely. Phones appeared in hands like shields, like evidence-gathering tools against the tension in the air. Marcus stood on his porch, folding his arms, scanning faces. His family stayed close behind him, daughter clutching her mother's hand, wife's jaw tight. Every gaze on him felt like a measurement, a judgment. "Why are so many people watching?" his daughter whispered. "They're neighbors," Marcus said carefully, though the tension pressed in on his chest. "They want to see what's happening. But don't worry. We'll be fine." A woman with a stroller stopped at the end of the street, phone raised. "Is this about the neighbor calling the cops?" she asked another onlooker. "That's what I heard," the man replied, lowering his voice. "But has been living here legally. Owns the house. Been working on it for months." Marcus noticed the murmurs, the cautious glances. People weren't interfering yet, but eyes, cameras, whispers, they carried a subtle power. Community pressure was a double-edged sword. On one side, it could protect him, on the other, it amplified scrutiny. He heard a horn and looked up. A black SUV had pulled up, camera gear visible in the backseat. A journalist stepped out, notebook in hand, eyes sharp. "Marcus?" she asked. "I'm reporting on the complaint. Mind if I ask a few questions?" He nodded. "Go ahead. But please, accurate reporting only." She smiled faintly, understanding. "Of course. I want the facts." Meanwhile, Officer Reynolds and Parks approached, papers in hand, glancing nervously at the growing crowd. Reynolds cleared his throat. "Sir, we're still reviewing the documentation. Need to verify a few things." Marcus gestured to the folder. "Everything you need is right here. You don't need assumptions. Facts are clear." Reynolds' lips pressed tight. "I understand. Still, neighbors' concerns have to be acknowledged." Marcus's chest tightened. "Concerns don't give anyone the right to question my ownership, my presence, my dignity. That's what's happening here, isn't it? Assumptions first, facts second." Parks shifted uncomfortably. "We're just doing our job." "Yes, your job," Marcus said, voice rising just slightly. "But being fair isn't optional. Don't let someone else's bias guide your judgment." Mrs. Carmichael appeared at her front door, peeking through curtains. She held her phone, recording. She waved slightly, smirk still on her face, as if victory was already hers. Marcus exhaled, focusing on the crowd instead. Phones rose, whispers grew, and a ripple of murmured support passed through the neighbors. Some nodded discreetly, some murmured encouragement, small but significant acts of silent solidarity. One neighbor, Mr. Patel, stepped forward. "We've seen him work. He built this house himself. He's never caused trouble here." Mrs. Carmichael scoffed, shouting back. "You don't know what you're seeing. Just wait, they'll see the truth soon enough." Marcus turned to the officers. "Do you see this? This isn't a lawless person threatening the neighborhood. This is me, living my life, being accused because of prejudice." Reynolds exhaled, tightening his jaw. "We have to follow procedure. Documentation. Verification. That's all." Marcus shook his head slowly. "Procedure doesn't erase bias. It doesn't fix assumptions. You need to acknowledge that too." The journalist stepped closer, pen hovering over her notebook. "Sir, can you walk me through your permits? Your process?" Marcus nodded, gesturing toward the folder. "Everything here. From the foundation to the landscaping, every inspection, every payment, every permit, all legal. All verified by the city." The crowd leaned in, watching closely. Phones captured every gesture, every glance. The tension was palpable, a collective gaze that could expose truth or fuel rumor. Mrs. Carmichael stepped forward, voice dripping with menace. "You think just showing papers fixes everything? People see what they want to see. You'll see." Marcus felt his stomach twist, but he forced calm. He stepped slightly forward, voice firm. "No. People will see facts. And facts are on my side." Reynolds cleared his throat again, glancing at Parks. "We'll continue verification. But, please remain available." The crowd shifted. A hush fell. Everyone sensed the weight of the moment, bias, authority, truth all colliding. Then, a soft beep from Marcus's phone drew his attention. A neighbor had texted, "Live stream started. Everyone can see. Don't let them twist this." Marcus felt a flicker of hope. Visibility could protect him, but it could also backfire. The eyes of the community were now part of the story, a silent jury, watching every gesture, every word. Mrs. Carmichael's smirk faltered slightly, a flash of uncertainty crossing her face. But only for a moment. Her phone continued recording, her eyes narrowed. Marcus took a deep breath, scanning the faces. "Let's make this clear," he said. "I'm not here to start conflict. I'm here to live in my home. My work is legal. My presence is legal. And my dignity is not negotiable." The journalist scribbled notes quickly, glancing up. "I think people are going to hear that." Marcus's daughter tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, are they going to leave us alone?" Marcus knelt, meeting her eyes. "They will have to. Eventually. Truth doesn't hide forever." Reynolds adjusted his hat, face tight. "Sir, just stay here for a bit longer. We'll contact the city offices." Marcus exhaled slowly. The tension, the eyes, the murmurs, they pressed on him, but he felt a tiny surge of strength. He wasn't alone. Truth had witnesses now. Cliffhanger, across the street, Mrs. Carmichael whispered into her phone, "Make sure they dig into everything. I want him gone." Marcus's heart sank. Even with cameras and witnesses, the battle wasn't over. And he realized that exposure could be both a shield and a new kind of threat. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across Marcus's front yard. The earlier crowd had thinned, but the sense of scrutiny lingered. Phones still glowed in windows. The journalist lingered across the street, taking notes and snapping discreet photos. Marcus's family had returned inside, though their anxiety was palpable. Marcus paced the porch, hands clasped behind his back. Every instinct told him the threat wasn't gone, it had just shifted. The subtle danger of assumptions, whispers, and biased authority hung heavy. A car door slammed across the street. Marcus looked up. It was Officer Reynolds, alone this time, papers in hand. His face was tight, professional, but his eyes carried an unspoken message. "Sir," Reynolds said, voice clipped. "We've reviewed most of the documents, but there are a few points that need clarification." Marcus felt the familiar twist of tension in his gut. "Clarification?" he asked, voice calm but sharp. "All the points are clear. The permits, the receipts, the approvals, they're all valid." Reynolds shifted uneasily. "Yes, but some of the city inspectors had notes. Minor discrepancies. We need to verify." Marcus's jaw tightened. Minor discrepancies? That's what happens when bureaucracy is overinterpreted. It doesn't invalidate ownership. It doesn't justify suspicion. Reynolds glanced around, lowering his voice. "Look, I'm just doing my job. You understand that, right?" "I do," Marcus said steadily. "But doing your job doesn't give you the right to assume guilt, to let someone else's prejudice dictate your actions." Parks appeared from the cruiser, carrying more paperwork. "Sir, there's also a report of someone seeing you outside late at night with construction equipment. Nothing illegal, but it's raised concerns." Marcus froze, disbelief twisting his chest. "Late at night? That's my schedule. I work long hours. I'm in my own yard, on my own property. That's not a concern. That's life." Reynolds rubbed his forehead. "Still, we have to document it. Protocol." Marcus exhaled, slow and deliberate, feeling the walls of authority tighten around him. "Protocol is fine. Bias isn't. Don't confuse the two." From the street, a soft laugh made him glance up. Mrs. Carmichael had returned, leaning against her fence, phone in hand. Her tone was casual, almost playful, but the meaning was clear. "I'm still here. I'm watching. You're vulnerable." Marcus's fists clenched, though he kept his voice calm. "I live here. I built this home. Every step, every nail, every brick is mine. And yet, you continue to treat me like a trespasser." Reynolds swallowed. "We're just verifying. That's all." Marcus's daughter appeared at the door, her small hand on the frame. "Daddy, are they going to take our house?" He crouched to her level, meeting her wide, worried eyes. "No, baby. This is our home. We'll protect it. Always." The journalist scribbled notes from across the street, looking up. "Marcus, can I record what's happening? It might help show the truth." He nodded, seeing the glimmer of hope. "Go ahead. But don't twist it. The truth is enough." Mrs. Carmichael muttered something into her phone, a low, venomous whisper. Marcus caught fragments. Dig deeper, make him sweat, legal action, neighbor support. The implied threat was clear. Her power wasn't just prejudice, it was manipulation, a network of potential legal and social consequences aimed at him. Reynolds shuffled papers nervously. We'll contact the city offices. Double-check the permits. But keep available for questioning. Marcus leaned against the railing, heart hammering. Each word from her felt like a stone dropped into the pond of his life, rippling outward. The psychological pressure, the micro-twists of authority, suspicion, and societal bias, was almost physical. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, "Be careful. They're watching more than you think." He felt a chill. It wasn't clear who sent it, but the implication was undeniable. The threat extended beyond the neighbor and the officers. Someone was tracking him, waiting for a misstep. Marcus exhaled slowly, keeping his composure. "I've faced threats before," he murmured under his breath. "Assumptions, whispers, subtle intimidation. But I've survived. This will not break me." He looked across the street. The journalist's notebook was filling quickly. The crowd had thinned but eyes remained, neighbors observing, phones recording, every small gesture adding pressure or protection. The microtension was almost unbearable. Reynolds cleared his throat. "Sir, we might need to come back tomorrow. Further verification." Marcus's pulse spiked. "Tomorrow?" His voice remained calm, but the stakes had escalated. "Every moment you delay is another moment I am treated as guilty, not as a homeowner. Every day of assumption, of bias, is an injustice." The officer nodded stiffly. "We understand." Marcus's wife stepped out the door, voice low but firm. "This is ridiculous. He's done nothing wrong. You're harassing him." Mrs. Carmichael waved dismissively. "I'm just protecting the neighborhood. Someone has to make sure things are right." Marcus clenched his teeth, swallowing anger and fear. Protecting the neighborhood? By weaponizing assumptions? He turned to the journalist. "Record everything. Every interaction, every comment. Truth has a way of exposing lies." Reynolds sighed, rubbing his temple. "Sir, just stay calm. We're following procedure." Marcus exhaled, surveying the scene. The sun was low, shadows stretching long and sharp. The psychological pressure, the surveillance, the biased authority, it all coalesced into a tangible, almost suffocating threat. And yet, beneath the tension, a quiet resilience took root. He was still standing. He was still legal. He was still right. Cliffhanger, across the street, Mrs. Carmichael whispered again into her phone, voice cold, "Make sure they find something. Anything. He can't get away with this." Marcus realized the battle wasn't just about proving ownership, it was about surviving targeted bias, navigating institutional pressure, and outlasting a neighbor determined to wield racism as a weapon. He clenched his fists. "I will not be intimidated." The following morning, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, coffee cooling beside him, eyes fixed on the folder of documents. The hum of his refrigerator was louder than usual, or maybe he was just listening too closely. Every sound, every shift in the air reminded him that the scrutiny hadn't stopped overnight. His phone buzzed. A message from the city office: "Inspector will review permits today. Please be available." He exhaled slowly. Verification was procedural, yes, but he knew the unspoken truth. Procedures were only fair if those enforcing them were impartial. Otherwise, they became instruments of doubt, of delay, of bias. The doorbell rang. Marcus opened it to find Officer Reynolds and Parks, clipboard in hand, expressions professional but tight. "Sir," Reynolds began, "we're following up on the verification. Inspectors are reviewing documents, but we need you to answer some additional questions." Marcus nodded, voice calm. "Of course. I'll answer. But remember, these are my home and my documents. The facts are clear." Reynolds didn't respond immediately. Parks shuffled papers. The silence was heavy. "First," Reynolds said slowly, "we need to confirm the construction timeline. There were reports that some work occurred outside permitted hours. Can you explain that?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "Yes. Some work was done late at night or early mornings. I was managing contractors and schedules. Everything was approved by city inspectors. Nothing illegal. Nothing suspicious." Reynolds scribbled notes, eyes flicking to Marcus, then to Parks, then to the folder. "Right, we just need to document it. Protocol." Marcus's chest tightened, frustration simmering beneath his calm. Protocol is fine. Bias masquerading as protocol is not. Parks shifted nervously. "Sir, there was a report that some building materials were temporarily stored in public areas during construction. Any comment?" Marcus exhaled slowly, holding back irritation. Yes. Materials were temporarily placed on the curb for delivery. All permits were in place, schedules communicated to the city. It's standard construction procedure. Reynolds glanced around, eyes narrowing slightly. Understood. Still, we need everything documented. Any discrepancies, even minor, have to be noted. Marcus's pulse quickened. Minor discrepancies were now the battlefield. Every small bureaucratic note became a potential weapon for suspicion. Every assumption, unspoken, subtle, was amplified. The journalist arrived, camera slung over her shoulder. "Morning," she said, voice calm but probing. "Mind if I continue documenting?" Marcus nodded. "Please. The truth needs witnesses." Across the street, Mrs. Carmichael appeared at her window, phone in hand. Her eyes flicked to Marcus, then to the journalist. The message was clear. "I'm still watching. Don't get complacent." Reynolds coughed. "Sir, there's also an anonymous note submitted to the inspector claiming inconsistencies in your plans." "Vague, yes, but it's been flagged." Marcus's chest tightened. "Vague is convenient," he said steadily. "It allows assumptions to masquerade as facts. The note has no basis in reality. Every document here is verifiable." Parks shifted. "We just have to follow the alerts, sir." Marcus's hands rested on the table, fingers tapping lightly. Each knock, each whisper, each bureaucratic alert was a psychological weight. He had faced prejudice before, but this was the slow grind of systemic bias combined with personal vendetta. The inspector arrived mid-morning. A woman in her 40s, clipboard in hand, hair tied back tightly. She was polite but thorough. "Mr. Marcus," she asked, voice professional. "I'll be reviewing the permits and inspections today." "Of course," Marcus said. "Everything is organized here." He gestured to the folder. She flipped through the papers quickly but carefully, scanning stamps, signatures, receipts. Marcus observed her closely. Eyes sharp. Hands methodical. No assumption. No hesitation. After a long pause, she looked up. "Everything appears to be in order. No discrepancies beyond what was previously noted for documentation purposes." Relief started to bloom, but Marcus didn't exhale fully. There was still Reynolds, there was still Mrs. Carmichael, and there was the lingering tension of assumption. Reynolds cleared his throat. "Well, we'll continue verification on our end. You may be contacted later." Marcus nodded, voice calm but firm. "Of course. But please remember, verification is about facts, not bias." Across the street, Mrs. Carmichael's smirk faltered slightly. She whispered into her phone, low and deliberate, "They better find something. He can't get away with this." Marcus exhaled slowly, focusing on his family, who had been watching quietly from the porch. His daughter's wide eyes and his wife's tight jaw reminded him why this fight mattered, not just ownership, but dignity. The journalist scribbled notes quickly, glancing up at Marcus. "People need to see this. All of it. The prejudice, the assumptions, the facts. It's a story of injustice and resilience." Marcus nodded, a quiet determination settling over him. "Exactly. They'll see both the threat and the truth. And the truth will stand." As the inspector left to file her report, Marcus felt the weight of anticipation pressing in. Every alert, every note, every assumption could be weaponized. Every bureaucratic step could be delayed. Then his phone buzzed. Another anonymous message, "They're looking deeper. Prepare for escalation." Marcus's stomach tightened. He realized the fight was far from over. Verification was procedural, but procedure was never neutral. The battle was legal, emotional, and psychological, all at once. Cliffhanger. That evening, as Marcus closed the folder, his phone buzzed again, this time a direct call from Officer Reynolds. "We've received a complaint about additional irregularities. You'll need to meet us tomorrow." Marcus stared at the screen, pulse racing. The investigation was escalating. The tension had just multiplied. The next morning, Marcus stepped onto his porch with a folder in hand and a calm determination he didn't entirely feel. The neighborhood was quiet, but the tension hung thick in the air. The journalist had arrived early, camera and notebook ready. Phones glowed from open windows across the street. Officer Reynolds and Parks pulled up in the cruiser, their faces tight. Reynolds' jaw was set. Parks shifted uneasily. "Mr. Marcus," Reynolds said, voice clipped. "We need to review these new complaints. Apparently, additional irregularities have been flagged." Marcus swallowed, pulse quickening. Irregularities. He set the folder on the table, flipping it open. Everything here is legal, verified, approved. Every stamp, every signature, every payment. You can check it with the city. Reynolds glanced at Parks, then back at Marcus. We have to follow procedure. You understand that? I understand, Marcus said steadily. But I also understand that procedure isn't a license to assume guilt based on skin color. Don't confuse suspicion with legality. Parks shifted uncomfortably. Sir, we're just doing our job. Yes, Marcus said sharply, and part of that job should be fairness, not fear. Across the street, Mrs. Carmichael peeked over her fence, phone in hand, smirk faintly lingering. Her presence alone carried weight, a constant reminder that she was still orchestrating this ordeal. Let's start with the timeline, Reynolds said, flipping through his notebook. There were reports of work done outside permitted hours again, and some discrepancies in inspection dates. Marcus exhaled slowly, forcing calm. Everything was scheduled according to the city's inspection availability. Some minor shifts in dates happen. That's normal construction protocol. None of it invalidates ownership or legality. Reynolds tapped a pen on the table. Some neighbors also reported suspicious activity near your property late at night. Marcus's jaw tightened. Suspicious activity? On my property, conducting legal work, at my own home? That's ridiculous. That's exactly the kind of assumption I warned you about. Reynolds' eyes flicked to Parks. We still have to document it. Marcus leaned forward, voice low but firm. Document, yes. Judge, no. Don't let someone else's prejudice dictate your assessment. That's not just unethical, it's dangerous. The journalist moved closer, whispering, Do you want me to record this part? It's intense. Marcus nodded. Please. Record the bias, the assumptions, everything. Mrs. Carmichael's voice rang from across the street, sharp and deliberate. Make sure they see what's really going on. Don't let him twist the story. Marcus's pulse quickened, anger flickering beneath the calm exterior. He felt the weight of her orchestration, the subtle threat wrapped in civility. He realized this wasn't just about paperwork anymore, it was about control, about intimidation, about weaponized prejudice. Sir, Reynolds said, flipping through a new set of notes, the anonymous note claims that some construction materials were moved without proper permits. Can you clarify? Marcus's hands rested on the folder, steadying himself. Yes. Materials were moved temporarily to facilitate delivery. The city approved all of it. Nothing illegal, nothing suspicious. Again, assumptions are not evidence. Parks shifted nervously. We just have to follow procedure. Marcus leaned in, voice low and firm. And I respect procedure. But procedure doesn't include prejudice. It doesn't excuse assumptions. Facts are facts. You can verify them. That's all that matters. Reynolds' jaw tightened. He glanced at Parks, then back at Marcus, measuring. The officer's internal conflict was visible, bias and doubt warring with the procedural mandate. Then Marcus' daughter appeared at the door, tiny hand gripping the frame. Daddy, are they going to make us leave? Marcus knelt, meeting her wide eyes. No, baby. This is our home. We built it. And no one, no assumption, no threat, no prejudice, can take that from us. Mrs. Carmichael's smirk faltered slightly, a hint of uncertainty flickering across her face. She whispered into her phone, low and deliberate, they better find something. I want him gone. The journalist scribbled notes furiously. This is going to get attention. People need to see this, the process, the bias, everything. Marcus exhaled slowly. Every word was a strategy, every calm gesture a defense. He couldn't afford to let emotion take control. The stakes were high, legality, dignity, visibility, and the subtle threat of prejudice all entwined in a web that he had to navigate with precision. Reynolds cleared his throat. We'll verify the new notes. But some of this might take a while. Stay available for follow-ups. Marcus's pulse spiked. Follow-ups? How many more assumptions will you chase before you see the facts? Parks shuffled nervously. Sir, we're just doing what's required. Marcus exhaled. Then do it properly. Don't let assumptions guide your steps. Facts only. Everything else is harassment, thinly veiled as procedure. The sun was low, shadows stretching across the yard. The psychological pressure pressed against him like a physical weight. Every glance, every whisper, Every flick of Mrs. Carmichael's phone felt orchestrated to intimidate. Marcus's mind raced. This is the moment. Calm, clarity, and facts are my weapons. Exposure is my shield. Bias is the enemy. Reynolds flipped through the folder one last time, brow tight. We'll proceed with verification. You'll be contacted. Marcus nodded, taking a deep breath. Good. And remember, truth will outlast prejudice every time. Across the street, Mrs. Carmichael's voice drifted softly, venomous and precise. Make sure they dig everything. I want him gone. No mistakes. Marcus clenched his fists, feeling both anger and resolve. The fight wasn't over. Authority had challenged him, bias had stalked him, and the threat was still very real. Cliffhanger. As the officers walked back to their cruiser, Marcus's phone buzzed with a new message. Someone's digging deeper. Prepare for escalation. He stared at the screen, pulse quickening. The confrontation had escalated beyond neighborhood gossip. It was now a strategic, high-stakes battle of bias versus truth, and Marcus knew the next moves would be critical. By mid-morning, the neighborhood was buzzing again, but this time the energy felt different. Phones were out, whispers carried a new tone, and across the street, Mrs. Carmichael's confidence seemed slightly rattled. Marcus stepped onto his porch, holding the folder tightly. The journalist had arrived early, camera rolling, notebook ready. Morning, Marcus, she said quietly. Everything you've done, documented, verified, it's all going public today. Marcus nodded, swallowing a mix of relief and lingering tension. Good. Let's make sure the facts are clear. No twisting. Just truth. Across the street, Mrs. Carmichael appeared at her window, phone pressed to her ear, eyes darting nervously. She whispered sharply, "They're broadcasting it? I don't like this. Make sure they don't spin it in his favor." Marcus's daughter tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, are they going to leave us alone now?" Marcus crouched to meet her eyes. "Not yet, baby. But soon, people will see what's real." Reynolds and Parks arrived, carrying additional paperwork. Reynolds' expression was tight, his jaw set. "Sir, we've received confirmation from the city inspector. All documentation checks out. No discrepancies beyond minor procedural notes." Marcus exhaled slowly, trying to keep the adrenaline from surging. "I've been saying that from the start. Facts, not assumptions." Parks shifted nervously. "So, there's nothing wrong?" Marcus' voice was firm. "Nothing. Except prejudice and assumptions masquerading as concern." Reynolds cleared his throat. We have to note the clearance officially. But yes, everything is verified." The journalist stepped closer. "This is the part that matters. People will see the full story, the harassment, the bias, the facts. It's going to put pressure on everyone involved." Marcus nodded. "Good. Exposure is justice. Truth is justice." Mrs. Carmichael, across the street, finally faltered visibly. Her phone slipped slightly from her hand, smirk wavering. She whispered, frustrated, "No, this isn't how it was supposed to go." Marcus turned to the journalist. "Start with the timeline, complaints, assumptions, verification. Highlight the bias, subtle threats, and how the system nearly let prejudice override facts. Show the contrast." The journalist nodded, camera zooming in slightly on Marcus as he explained, voice steady, authoritative. "Every step, I followed the rules. Every document is verified. And yet, assumptions were made about me, my family, my property, simply because of skin color. That ends today." From the porch, neighbors peeked out, some whispering encouragement, others filming on their phones. A few had spoken up during previous days. Now, with documentation in hand and the story going public, their murmurs carried weight. Reynolds scribbled on his notes, tight-lipped. Parks glanced at the crowd, uncomfortable. The institutional tension was palpable. The officers had followed procedure, but the truth now publicly contradicted the assumptions that fueled their initial questioning. Marcus felt a flicker of vindication, tempered by exhaustion. He exhaled, looking at his daughter. "This is our home. And now, people will know it's ours. Not hers to control with whispers and threats." Mrs. Carmichael, realizing her influence was diminishing, waved her phone angrily, trying to call someone else into her orbit. But the journalist's live feed had already reached beyond the block, broadcasting the injustice and truth to a wider audience. Reynolds sighed, almost imperceptibly. "Sir, we'll file the official report noting clearance and verification. That should conclude the matter." Marcus's heart pounded. Conclusion? It's only concluding because the facts are undeniable. That's how it should always have been. Across the street, Mrs. Carmichael muttered under her breath, "This isn't over. I'll find something." Marcus shook his head slightly. The battle isn't over, but exposure is a shield. Truth protects those who build, not those who assume. The journalist stepped back. We've documented everything. From the complaints, the bias, the intimidation, to verification. People will see it all. A neighbor called out from across the street. "Marcus, you did it. This is your home, you're right." A wave of murmured agreement followed. Phones capturing, whispers spreading. Community support had finally shifted, subtly but decisively. The tide was turning. Reynolds looked at Marcus, a mixture of respect and residual discomfort on his face. "Sir, we've noted everything. You were right." Marcus exhaled slowly, tension ebbing but not gone. He knew the cost, the emotional strain, the psychological pressure, the sleepless nights, the fear for his family. Justice wasn't just the paperwork, it was enduring the weight of bias until it collapsed under exposure. Mrs. Carmichael finally retreated inside, phone pressed to her chest. She knew the story had slipped beyond her control. The weaponized prejudice had been neutralized by documentation, witnesses, and public scrutiny. Marcus leaned against the railing, breathing deeply. The sun cast golden light over his house, the home he built, defended, and now, publicly acknowledged as rightfully his. The journalist whispered, camera still rolling, "Marcus, how does it feel?" He smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and lingering sorrow. "It feels like justice. But it's not without cost. Every moment of fear, every assumption, every biased action, it leaves a mark. The victory is sweet, but it's tempered by what we had to endure." Neighbors began to gather, discreetly but supportive. Phones recording, cameras capturing, and words of encouragement spreading. The community's eyes had shifted from suspicion to support. Marcus watched his daughter run into the yard, laughing softly for the first time in days. He felt the weight of trauma lift slightly, replaced by quiet resilience. Cliffhanger, just as he began to relax, his phone buzzed. Another alert, not from the city, not from the officers, but from an unknown number. They won't give up. She's planning her next move. Marcus stared at the screen, pulse steadying but tension lingering. Exposure had won today, but the fight against bias and hidden threats was far from over. By late afternoon, the city officers had officially confirmed Marcus's paperwork. Every permit, inspection, and document had been verified. The verification forms were now stamped, signed, and archived. Marcus held the official papers in his hands, a tangible symbol of justice finally catching up to reality. He stepped onto the porch, folder clutched tightly, and looked across the street. The journalist was live streaming the moment, microphone pointed at him. Cameras from neighbors' phones were rolling. The tension in the air was almost cinematic, heavy, palpable, urgent. "Marcus," the journalist whispered, "this will show everything. Your perseverance, the bias, the verification, and the truth. People will see it all." He nodded slowly, breathing in the warm late afternoon air. "They'll see. Finally, facts will outweigh assumptions. Justice doesn't need vengeance, it needs truth." Across the street, Mrs. Carmichael appeared at her window, face pale. She fumbled with her phone, voice sharp but weak. "No, they can't just, this isn't over." Marcus's pulse tightened, not from fear, but from the dramatic weight of exposure. Her control over the narrative had collapsed. The very power she tried to wield through microaggressions, assumptions, and anonymous complaints had evaporated under documentation, verification, and community attention. Officer Reynolds and Parks arrived, expressions restrained but less rigid than before. Reynolds handed Marcus the final report. "Sir, all official concerns are cleared. The complaints are documented as unsubstantiated. You were right." Marcus exhaled, voice calm but firm. "Thank you. I only ask that lessons are learned here, not just for me, but for everyone in this community. Prejudice can't be allowed to masquerade as concern." Reynolds nodded, tension easing. "We understand." Mrs. Carmichael had retreated inside her home, phone pressed to her chest. Her authority, her influence, her ability to weaponize bias, it was gone. Social pressure and institutional verification had dismantled her power piece by piece. The journalist's camera captured Marcus's wife and daughter joining him on the porch. His daughter's small hand clutched his, while his wife's eyes glimmered with relief and pride. Neighbors began to step out of their homes cautiously, murmuring words of support. Phones were raised, some snapping photos, others recording short clips. The subtle shift in the community atmosphere was clear. Those who had whispered judgment now witnessed truth prevailing. Marcus turned to the journalist. Explain the timeline. The complaints, the verification, the threats, the bias, and the ultimate resolution. Let people see how assumptions and prejudice fail when confronted with truth. The journalist nodded, camera capturing every gesture. Understood. This will be shared widely. People will know how you stood your ground, documented facts, and resisted intimidation. Reynolds glanced uneasily across the street at Mrs. Carmichael's window, then at Marcus. She's going to be upset. Marcus's lips curved slightly, a mix of calm triumph and residual fatigue. Good. Let her be upset. The truth is not subject to her approval. Mrs. Carmichael whispered again into her phone, they can't just, this isn't fair. Marcus shook his head slightly. Fair? Justice isn't about her feeling fair, it's about the truth prevailing. The journalist stepped closer, lowering her voice for clarity. Marcus, how do you feel after all of this? He exhaled slowly, looking at his family and then across the street at the neutralized threat. It's bittersweet. The victory is mine, but the cost, the fear, the tension, the emotional weight, is real. Bias leaves marks even after it's defeated. Resilience, patience, and documentation were my only weapons. Across the street, a few neighbors murmured, sharing their impressions. Some whispered apologies, some quiet admiration. The neighborhood's dynamic had shifted. Support had replaced suspicion, subtle solidarity replaced whispered assumptions. Reynolds cleared his throat. Sir, we'll file the closure formally. Your record is clear. You've been vindicated. Marcus's pulse slowed. Exposure, community support, and institutional verification had converged. Mrs. Carmichael's power to dictate assumptions or manipulate authority had failed. Finally, poetic justice had arrived, not through vengeance, but through truth, visibility, and resilience. Marcus turned to his daughter. You see, baby? This is our home. And sometimes, truth and patience win. She nodded slowly, eyes wide with understanding. We did it, Daddy. Yes, he said quietly, voice steady, holding her hand. We did. But never forget, the fight for fairness is ongoing. This victory is one step in a larger journey. The journalist lowered her camera. This story, people will remember it. The community will see, the city will see. The subtle threats, the assumptions, the bias, all of it exposed. Marcus exhaled, feeling the lingering weight of tension dissipate slowly. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to feel relief without vigilance. Mrs. Carmichael, defeated but unwilling to leave her narrative entirely, whispered one last time, they think this is over, they haven't seen the last of me. Marcus shook his head, letting the word slide. Exposure had neutralized her influence. The legal, social, and emotional mechanisms had aligned in his favor. Cliffhanger or emotional beat. As the journalist wrapped up, a final message arrived on Marcus's phone. Anonymous, simple, you stood tall. The world is watching. Keep building, keep thriving. Marcus stared at the screen, heart pounding with a mixture of relief and lingering tension. The battle had been won, but the emotional scars reminded him that justice, while achievable, demanded vigilance, resilience, and courage. He looked at his family, the neighborhood, and the golden light falling across his home. This is more than bricks and permits, he murmured. It's dignity, it's resilience, it's truth. And no amount of prejudice can ever take that from us. The evening settled over the street with a soft, golden haze. Marcus stood on his porch, the folder of official reports resting on the railing. Every stamp, every signature, every verification sheet was a testament, not just to legality, but to persistence, dignity, and truth. His daughter ran across the yard, laughter bubbling up like sunlight breaking through tension. His wife joined her, brushing stray hair from her face, smiling. The weight of fear and scrutiny had lifted, replaced by cautious relief. Marcus exhaled slowly. The journey to this moment had been exhausting. Bias, assumptions, and orchestrated threats had pressed on him for days, testing his patience and courage. But exposure and documentation, coupled with community support, had shifted the balance. Across the street, Mrs. Carmichael remained inside, curtains drawn. Her smirk had vanished, replaced by frustration, a quiet acknowledgement of defeat. The subtle power she had tried to wield, The whispers, the anonymous complaints, the assumptions, had failed. Reynolds and Parks passed in their cruiser one last time, nodding. No words were needed. Verification had cleared Marcus completely, and institutional authority had aligned with fairness, leaving prejudice powerless. The journalist lowered her camera, voice quiet but earnest. "Marcus, your story is going to reach people. The subtle harassment, the abuse of bias, the persistence, it's all on record now." Marcus nodded, feeling both pride and fatigue. "It's important people see the process. It's not just me, it's a reminder of how assumptions and prejudice can pressure ordinary lives. And how diligence, patience, and truth can resist that." Neighbors began stepping out more openly. Phones raised, whispers of congratulations, nods of respect. A subtle shift in the community atmosphere was now tangible, support replacing suspicion, solidarity replacing silent judgment. One neighbor called out, voice carrying softly, "Marcus, congratulations. You stood firm." A ripple of murmurs followed. Some neighbors, who had been hesitant observers, now spoke openly, acknowledging the injustice Marcus had faced. Marcus's daughter ran to him, tiny hands clutching his. "Daddy, we did it. Our home is safe." He crouched to her level, holding her gently. "Yes, baby. We stood tall. Together. And truth made the difference." The journalist whispered, pen poised. "Do you want to say something to the viewers? Something personal?" Marcus considered, then smiled faintly, voice steady. "Fairness isn't automatic. It's fragile. And sometimes, it takes patience, courage, and persistence to uphold. Stand up, document everything, and never let bias silence your truth. That's how change happens." Across the street, Mrs. Carmichael finally retreated fully, curtains drawn tight. Her attempts to weaponize prejudice had been neutralized. Her orchestrated threats, the whispers, and the anonymous notes, powerless against verification, transparency, and resilience. Marcus felt a quiet weight lift. Justice had not come through vengeance, but through clarity, exposure, and persistence. His home remained his dignity intact, and the subtle structures of authority had been compelled to act fairly. He glanced at his wife, who gave a small, proud nod. "We've earned this," he whispered. "But the work, being vigilant, never really ends." The journalist packed her camera, quiet satisfaction in her eyes. "Your story is complete, Marcus. People will see it, and it will matter. It already is." Marcus exhaled, letting the tension slide. His daughter twirled in the yard, carefree, and his wife finally relaxed. The sun dipped lower, casting warm light across the home Marcus had built and defended. He thought of the days of microaggressions, whispered threats, and subtle surveillance. Each had left an emotional mark. But now, the community had witnessed truth, the authorities had been held accountable to facts, and the subtle machinery of prejudice had been exposed. Cliffhanger or emotional beat, even as peace settled, Marcus knew the vigilance required of anyone confronting bias never fully ends. Yet tonight, he allowed himself to feel triumph, relief, and resilience, a bittersweet victory that honored both struggle and endurance. He looked at the golden light falling across his yard and his family. "This house," he murmured softly, "is more than bricks and permits. It's proof that truth, patience, and courage can withstand the weight of prejudice." Neighbors waved, some lingering to offer smiles and quiet congratulations. Phones continued to capture moments, not for gossip this time, but for witness. The subtle culture of suspicion had been replaced, if only temporarily, by recognition, respect, and solidarity. Marcus's eyes met the horizon. The fight against bias, he realized, was ongoing. But exposure, documentation, and persistence had given him a shield. And even as vigilance remained necessary, victory had finally arrived, soft, earned, and resonant. His daughter ran back into his arms, and he hugged her tightly. "We're home. And nothing can change that." The journalist whispered, camera turned down, "It's a story people will remember." Marcus nodded, exhausted but resolute. The sun set over his home, golden and warm. The neighborhood, the authorities, the community, all had been tested. Truth had endured. Justice, though slow and hard won, had prevailed. Final emotional note, the scars of bias remained, but resilience had endured. Marcus had defended his home, his family, and his dignity. The world had watched, and for now, fairness had won.